Ever get the feeling that to really understand where tech is going, you kind of have to look back at where it's been?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're diving into today, those echoes of the past shaping our future.
I like it.
And we're starting with something you, as someone plugged into the latest tech trends, are going to find fascinating, I think.
Let me guess. Another AI breakthrough, right?
You know it.
Mm-hmm.
This time, it's about making AI way more energy efficient, which immediately caught my eye.
Yeah.
This paper on Archive, a hot topic on Hacker News today, is saying that simply focusing on addition in algorithms could be the key.
Interesting.
Before I picture a bunch of calculators running the next generation of AI, can you break this down for us?
Yeah, so it's actually a really clever approach that challenges how we think about building AI. Instead of relying on complex computations, which eat up energy, this research suggests that using simple addition, but in a clever way, could make language models drastically more efficient.
So less about brute forcing it and more about elegant design. Kind of reminds me of that saying, work smarter, not harder.
Exactly, and the implications are huge. Imagine AI becoming more accessible, not just to big tech companies, but to smaller organizations, researchers, even individuals. This kind of efficiency could really democratize access to AI.
That's a really good point, and timely too, given the other big AI news. OpenAI's restructuring to avoid takeovers.
Yeah.
They're going the public benefit route, seemingly to prioritize ethical development. What do you make of that move?
It's a fascinating development. OpenAI's decision suggests they're anticipating a future where AI's power could be misused, and by choosing this structure, they're aiming to stay independent and focused on the broader good rather than just profits.
Which makes you wonder, is this a sign of things to come? Will we see a future where ethical considerations drive AI development? It's almost like we're witnessing the early stages of a new kind of tech landscape.
Yeah, and this ties directly into how the past influences the future. We've seen time and again that groundbreaking innovations often build upon seemingly outdated technologies. Take, for example, the discovery of those old Portuguese punched cards someone posted about on Hacker News.
Oh yeah, those things.
Yeah.
I have to admit, my knowledge of punched cards is pretty limited. What's the significance of finding them, especially a Portuguese set?
Well, it's a tangible reminder of how computing evolved globally. Punched cards were the primary way we used to communicate with computers, long before keyboards and touchscreens.
Oh, wow.
Finding these cards in Portugal highlights that this technology, though seemingly ancient now, had a global impact, shaping the early days of computing around the world.
It's like finding artifacts from a lost civilization, except instead of pottery shards, it's these cardboard rectangles that held entire programs.
Precisely. And speaking of innovations from the past influencing the future, this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry really highlights that connection.
This year's prize went to the pioneers of protein design and prediction, right? I saw that trending on Hacker News, too.
Yes. It's a field with incredible potential. These scientists developed ways to design and predict the intricate folding patterns of proteins, essentially giving us the ability to build proteins from scratch.
Wow.
Imagine the possibilities in medicine, materials, science.
It's like they unlocked a whole new toolbox for manipulating the building blocks of life itself.
Yeah. It's like they've given us the blueprints to a whole new world of possibilities, you know? We're not just talking about understanding existing proteins, but actually designing new ones with specific purposes.
That's mind-blowing. And to think it all goes back to understanding these intricate folds, the patterns that dictate a protein's function. It really underscores the importance of basic research, even if it seems esoteric at the time.
Absolutely. You never know where a deeper understanding of fundamental principles might lead. Speaking of which, there's been a fascinating debate raging in the coding world that ties into this idea of elegant design.
You're talking about that whole inline code discussion, right?
Yeah.
I saw John Carmack, the game developer legend, weighed in on that, sparking a whole debate on Hacker News. For those of us who don't speak fluent code, could you shed some light on what that's all about?
Sure, it's all about how code is structured. Imagine you're following a recipe, and instead of just listing the ingredients, it goes off on a tangent, right? Explaining how to make each one from scratch.
Right.
That's kind of like inlined code. It's inserting a chunk of code directly into a program's flow, even when it could be a separate reusable function.
So it's like cluttering up your recipe with a bunch of extra steps that could be streamlined. I can see how that would make things messy.
Exactly. And Carmack was advocating for keeping things clean and modular, avoiding unnecessary inlining for better organization and readability. It's about finding that balance between getting the job done and writing code that's elegant, efficient, and easy to understand.
It's like the difference between building something with a hodgepodge of materials versus having a well-organized toolbox with the right tools for the job.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of tools and building, this next story takes us back to the digital realm, but with a nostalgic twist. Remember Winamp?
Yeah.
That classic media player with all the customizable skins?
Oh, absolutely. A blast from the past. Who didn't spend hours trying out different skins for 1 amp back in the day?
Well, someone recreated it in other classic media players using web components, and it's got people talking on Hacker News.
So they basically rebuilt these vintage interfaces using modern web technologies. That's pretty ingenious. What's the significance of that?
Well, it highlights just how powerful and versatile web development has become. Web components allow developers to create reusable modular elements. Think of them like digital Lego bricks. This project demonstrates how these bricks can be used to recreate complex interfaces, potentially leading to a more efficient and creative way to build web applications.
It's like the difference between building a house brick by brick versus having prefabricated walls and roof sections. You can assemble things much faster and focus on the design and functionality.
Precisely. And it speaks to a broader trend in tech, where we're constantly finding ways to do more with less, to build upon existing technologies and create new possibilities. Speaking of which, this next story is a great example of how even our understanding of the brain is constantly evolving.
This is the one about how what we did 2 weeks ago is still changing our brains right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, that one really caught my eye.
It's a fascinating area of neuroscience that challenges our assumptions about how the brain works. It highlights the remarkable plasticity of our brains, the idea that they're constantly rewiring and adapting based on our experiences, even those from the past.
So it's not just about remembering specific events, but rather how those experiences leave a lasting imprint on our neural pathways.
Exactly. It's like walking through a forest and leaving a trail behind you. Even after you've passed, the path remains, subtly altering the landscape. Our brains are constantly forming these neural pathways, strengthening some, pruning others, and this continuous remodeling is shaped by our experiences over time.
That's both amazing and a little bit humbling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like our brains are constantly evolving narratives, even when we're not consciously aware of it. But before we go too deep down that philosophical rabbit hole, how about we shift gears and talk about something a little more wild? This next story takes us from the intricacies of the human brain to the wilds of Costa Rica.
Okay.
Seems like jaguars and pumas are becoming unlikely allies to ranchers there.
Yeah.
Did you see this one?
It's a great example of how conservation efforts can have these unexpected ripple effects.
Right.
Apparently, the jaguars and pumas are helping to keep the peccary population in check.
Peccaries. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what those are.
Think of them like wild pigs.
Okay.
Maybe not as cute and cuddly.
Right.
They can be pretty destructive to crops, which is a problem for ranchers.
Ah, so the big cats are acting as natural pest control, which benefits the ranchers.
Right.
Everyone wins.
Exactly. It's a win for the ranchers, a win for the jaguars and pumas, and a win for the ecosystem as a whole.
Nice.
It's a good reminder that sometimes working with nature, rather than against it, leads to the most effective solutions.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a nice reminder that there's always something new to learn, and that often the most fascinating discoveries come from unexpected places.
Mm-hmm.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from AI efficiency to protein folding to ancient punch cards, and even the surprising allies ranchers in Costa Rica have found.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It really shows how interconnected everything is.
It does, doesn't it? And how important it is to stay curious and keep exploring these trends, these echoes of the past shaping our future.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, I'm curious, what's one thing from today's deep dive that really sparked your curiosity, something you'll be thinking about long after this episode ends?
For me, it's that idea of AI becoming more accessible.
Right?
The potential there is huge, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where this all goes.
It certainly will.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure, as always.
Until next time, keep exploring those fascinating echoes of the past.